Just first off, just wanted to start off just thanking our ownership, Sheila, the Ford family, Rod Wood, just their unwavering support, their belief, the resources they provide means everything for our success. And want to thank Dan. He's been an amazing partner in this journey, as he always is. And I say, the unique thing about Dan is that he's got this ability to balance and understand all the different perspectives and viewpoints that's coming from coaching and personnel, and it is very advantageous in our process. So I want to thank him. I want to thank our scouts, our personnel staff. They've been working extremely hard to get us to this point where we're at in the process. And, the rest of our coaching staff, as soon as the season's over, we had to go to the Senior Bowl. They dove straight in and then on into free agency and draft prep and all that stuff. So, that's not an easy balance, but they're all passionate. They've been extremely helpful, and they provide a lot of critical information that we've needed throughout the process. And just everybody else from a support staff standpoint, video analytics, operations, player wellness, player engagement, IT, pretty much everybody from a medical, our training staff. I mean, they've been very, very instrumental into getting us to where we're at. And definitely special shout out to our PR staff. Got nominated for the Pete Rozelle Award, so didn't want to forget that. I used to be a PR intern, so I know that means a lot. But right now we're in a good place. Still things fluid here and there with some new information coming in as we speak, but we're confident in our process up to this point. Take any questions.
Kind of hit on it there. 2 is a different ballgame, right?
Yeah.
It seems like the options are so easy to narrow down to just a few, right? So barring, no trade down, how solid are you on your top 2 choices right now? And if new information is still in play here, what kind of new things can change that at this stage of the process?
Well, anything can happen any day. I will say that, but and it's not just narrowing down to your top 2. You better have, your top 5. You better have your top 10 in place, because you just don't know whatever's going to happen each day. But we do have it narrowed down, and we feel confident where we're at with how we have it pared down, and we'll just let the process unfold.
Brad, at this point, has there been any increased chatter regarding the number 2 pick from other teams?
Actually, it hasn't been a whole lot, since the last time that we spoke down at the annual meetings. Actually had a few dialogues before then, but not a whole lot. I do say that I think, heading into this weekend and the early portion of next week, I do think possibility of some chatter and some more dialogue could increase. But right now, it hasn't been a whole lot.
Justin asked, how big is that bucket at the top, of elite, top tier players, I guess? Is it 1, 2, 6, 8? How many guys are in that top tier of draft prospects for you?
Well, I wouldn't call it the elite bucket. I would say that the cluster of players that we're looking at are very, very evenly rated and graded. And I said, it's just what fits your team the best, and what fulfills, who's the best football player, and, who may fill a need there, or who's the best, fit for the future, and how you can be set up for success going forward. So you kind of factor in all those things, but you can call the bucket a lot of different things, I guess, but it's just a bucket that we feel really, really good about.
Can you give a number?
No, I can't.
He was saying he didn't really have a concern. Obviously, there's been a lot of quarterbacks rumored to you guys and some of the pre-draft visits and stuff like that. But how seriously would you guys, obviously you can't tip your hand, but how seriously are you guys evaluating some of that quarterback talent out there this year?
Well, I'll keep it consistent. I've been saying all along that, we're looking for a game changer at that pick, and really any picks. And so, if that, and I said all positions. So if that position is a quarterback, then it's a quarterback, So, and just because, often it's been slated that, picking up there, it's either be the quarterback or pass rusher or a tackle and all that kind of stuff. But look, I said from day one, man, give me a game changer at any position. And there are multiple positions where we do see that potential game changers could be there in the future. You know, time will tell, of course, if however they develop. We feel very confident in the coaching staff we have to develop those players. But yeah, it could be any position. But obviously, we spent a lot of time on those quarterbacks. We brought a couple in this week, a few in this week actually, and just making sure that we're doing our due diligence, got our ducks in a row. We spent a lot of time with them, but you know, like I've told you guys, even last year, I think it's good business to know the quarterback market every single year, but this one's a little bit of a unique one.
Everybody described you. I know you was like a draft junkie. How much do you enjoy this process? Though? Like, is this like one of your favorite times of the year? Like, obviously you're in a different role as GM and scout, but like, how much do you enjoy just the overall process of getting to know these guys in this whole draft?
I love it every single day. Every single day you get an opportunity to dive deeper into this process. You just love every second of it, every minute of it. You know, it doesn't really feel like work. It's just, you know, it's your passion of what you love to do. So, you know, there's some grueling long hours and there's some tough decisions. There's some, I won't say sleepless nights, but some nights where it was waking up like, okay, what are we going to do here? But at the end of the day, I'm very, very fortunate to be in the position that I am, and very, very fortunate for the staff that I have surrounded me to help us to get to this process. But I just love it, man. I just love doing it, man, and I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Brad, when there's a unit that's really dominant, how tough is it to determine, are the individual players good because of the players around them, or are they a product of the unit? Obviously, I'm talking about Georgia, but not to get into particular players.
If the player is benefiting from a dominant unit, yeah, you know, you hear that often, and I think you do have to look at the player in itself, because at the end of the day, if you got a dominant defense, right, and let's just say the linebackers and the two edge players are just playing hard and running to the football, but that guy inside is not, well, you're evaluating that guy inside. If he's not running to the football and he's not competing, then that's not benefiting all the other talent around him. So, and so we don't look at it that way. You know, I've heard that being said of, well, he's playing on this defense or he's playing on that. Well, this is the NFL. So it's good that, you know, players like what you said, Georgia, like players like a Georgia defense where they'll probably have a lot of guys get drafted off that defense. It's good exposure to get, because you see close to what, you know, they'll be playing with at the next level.
How much misinformation is out there, and how much more do you expect as you get closer to draft day?
I hope it's not a lot of misinformation out there that we're actually utilizing, but you know, everybody, you know, wants to be, I guess you want to say, careful, you know, and you know, around this time, everybody has a little bit of a craving to find out, what's this going to do? What's he going to do? What's this team going to do? And I think through all of that, some misinformation can get out there, you know, but it's totally understandable. But there are some, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of things that could change. You know, again, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's just not in just the NFL draft. That's just in our regular everyday lives. You just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's why you just got to be prepared and trust your process. But yeah, you got to kind of weed through some things from an information standpoint, but you got to, you know who your trusted sources are and be confident in your process.
Something you've hammered home since you've been here is just the emphasis on football character, grit, the guys you want to build this roster around. I'm curious how much flexibility there is around that when maybe you're not fully sure about the grittiness of the player, but the talent maybe trumps it, and you trust maybe your coaching staff to get the maximum out of there. Is there flexibility at all? Is there an on-off switch with you either have it or you don't to be a fit for this culture?
Well, you know, football character is, like you said, that's extremely high on our list of standards, and especially being gritty, you know, and having grit and wanting to persevere and overcome. But It is. I'll answer for the question about the coaching staff. We're very fortunate to have a coaching staff in place that has a passion to develop players, and they're very, very good. And there's been countless examples of that coming to fruition. But from a talent versus football character standpoint, you gotta be careful, and you got to make sure. Okay, just because a guy's talented, if he doesn't have the football character required, will he reach his potential? Will he be coachable enough so the coaches can develop that player? So you got to be mindful of that. It is the NFL. You do have to have a baseline of talent, but obviously it can work the other way too. If the talent is not quite to the elite level, but the football character is high, then that player will do everything in their power to make sure that they reach their potential.
Define football character, and how does that, what does that mean in the locker room too, I guess, personality-wise, and how that might mesh with your teammates?
Yeah, well, you just said it, being a good teammate, being a good teammate, being accountable, but then you started talking about passion for football, perseverance, leadership, work ethic, preparation, all those things lead to what we call good football character.
When deciding to target in a draft or who to target, do you even consider who might be available or what positions are deep in next year's draft?
Say that one more time.
This is from the listeners, okay? When deciding who to target in a draft, do you even consider who might be available or what positions are deep in next year's draft?
That is a good question. No, it doesn't really. You don't want to pass up. You don't want to pass up a good football player that can help your football team, or maybe even it's a good depth player that we have a lot of hope for and we see a lot of potential for. That you can draft now based on what is coming next class. Now, look, in our system, our scouts do a great job. They already know next year's draft class. I can look in and see, okay, this is what, the 23 draft looks like. But you just don't know what happened, just like I've been saying all along with new information coming on. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen the next month. You don't know what's going to happen the next year. So you can't really make decisions based off that.
How much added value does it have if it does, that fifth-year option comes into play there?
Yeah, it just depends on, you're talking about added value just for, if you pick a quarterback there at 32, obviously you do have that fifth-year option. Is it a team that is sitting right at the top of the second round or middle in the second round that wants to, trade up into, in front of us, to pick a quarterback, So there is value there because obviously you just don't know how long you assume how long you think that it'll take to develop a quarterback and when he'll be available to help you, but to have that extra year.
Just a quarterback, or is it other positions too? Like if there's a run at some position and somebody wants to trade up to get to that spot?
It could be that scenario as well, but it's been more vogue at the quarterback position, I think.
But how much does, you have a really young roster, you got 20 picks or whatever, so how much do you take next year's draft into account just in terms of balancing the roster or the flexibility to move around next year? Is it important at all to acquire extra draft capital for future seasons, in the next 2 weeks for you?
Sure, because it's equating to your future. What Dan and I have been trying to build here. You wanna have future capital. That's always important. We have that already. For the 23 draft, and if we're in the position that we can add even more future capital, that kind of makes things better. It kind of a little bit more. Optimism, you could say, for our future, but again, you can't base all the decisions based on this year's draft.
Brett, you've talked a lot about foundational pieces and building the foundation for this the program, this franchise. How would you describe your draft philosophy as far as do you think you're more of a patient, person when it comes to picking players, or are you willing to be bold when you need to be bold and maybe taking a little bit of a chance on a talented guy who maybe isn't a perfect fit for you?
Mm-hmm. I'll probably sum it up like this. If there's a player that we have buying and that we want, I'm going to try to get that player. Just bottom line. So, you know, there is value in being patient and sitting back, and you just got to assess, you know, where the value is on your draft board and kind of what the volume and depth is. But if the conviction is that high, you know, you can't just sit, wait, and be patient and just see if that player is going to be there or not. Sometimes you got to be aggressive and go and get them. And, you know, that's how I stand often. Now, there's not a lot of those players, you know, throughout the draft always. But when that player is identified, you know, I'll just be aggressive.
Does last year's, you know, 3-win season, you know, I mean, you want to build for the future and have a solid base and, you know, sustainability and all that, but does last year coming off 3 wins, does that speed up your clock at all as far as you have 8 picks in your hand, you might be willing to take a chance and go after some guys who, you know, move up in the draft, trade picks as opposed to stockpiling them and do something sooner rather than later?
You know, the season didn't really speed that up a little bit. It actually, and I think I may have said this before, that 3-win season taught us patience. It definitely taught me patience, and we had to practice a lot of patience through that 3-win season and through a lot of adverse moments that I've shared with y'all previously. But that patience that's learned through those adverse moments during that 3-win season, you definitely have to practice it, you know, in the other phases of the player acquisition process. And it's about, you know, having belief and confidence in our plan, which we do. But yeah, you just don't want to be irrational at any points and lose your patience. So yeah, I think patience is important to have, and just because of, you don't want to suffer from the resulting bias and just kind of change your plan and philosophy and just go the other route because, you know, some happen that you didn't want to happen.
Hey Brad, is that what you would say to people that think you haven't got good enough or better enough through a free agent period and trade period that see the most player movement like ever? Like, there are people out there wondering, well, what have the Lions done, with the exception of bringing back a bunch of guys that, you know, won 3 games?
Yeah, well, I'll say this about the free agency and player movement process is that we signed back a lot of players. And I've always said that, you know, the players that we signed back, they were free agents to the entire league. And so I'll give you an example. Let's take a Tracy Walker, right? We signed Tracy Walker back. Tracy Walker, we have Tracy Walker stacked, you know, on X amount of number of safeties across the whole league. Well, if you pick the player that you have ranked underneath Tracy Walker, to the outside narrative, you're saying, man, they're aggressive. But you got the player underneath, you know what I mean? So it's not always the fact that you did not go the external route. Like, we didn't look at Charles Harrison the way he stacked with the rest of the pass rushers in the league and said, we don't want that narrative out there. Let's get the player underneath Charles Harris, because then it'll look like we were a little bit more aggressive. You know, so it's like, no, we want Charles Harris because we know what he is and we know how he stacks throughout the rest of the league. So I've always said, just because you go external help, that doesn't mean, because again, and the other thing is those players aren't free. So Charles Harris isn't free. Tracy Walker isn't free. So you're still being aggressive. You still have to pay, you know, contracts for those players. So that's what I'll say. So it's not that you're not being aggressive or you're not active. It's just that because it's your own players. And I've always said those players had great seasons for us last year. They played some of their best football under our staff last year.
They're kind of looking at it the wrong way.
That's just my viewpoint. I'm not saying that they're looking at the wrong way, because there's players that could be above them on other teams, you know. So.
What do you think you learned from last year? You know, just like now that you've sat in the chair and you've made those picks before. I remember you saying, like, you know, you thought about trading up for Levi, and John was like, be patient. You know, is there anything that you learned maybe that can help you this second time through?
Well, I will say that was a lesson to be patient. But probably one of the other things that I learned is knowing the whole market in terms of every single position, knowing the free agency market, how the free agency market went, living through the free agency market, then heading into the draft, and kind of having that foresight and kind of thinking what's going to happen. I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned, where you look at, okay, all right, what is the quarterback, care? So I know you've asked me about the quarterback mark. Okay, what if that stops? Okay, well then what's the draft mark? So all of that, and I've always known that, but to live through that last year and then to carry that knowledge and experience into this year has been helpful. Exactly.
Are there any extra challenges to having knowing you have 2 picks on that first day? I mean, do you have to set up your board differently or go about the preparation for next Thursday night differently than you normally would?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I will say it's a little bit different in terms of especially not just obviously 2, but 32 and 34. You're almost going back to back, but the nights are split. Or last year we were 7 then to 41, so you got time to kind of plan. But I do think that it does kind of alter kind of your planning and preparation slightly, but that's basically what we've been doing this whole time. So those alterations and adjustments have been made already, so we'll be ready to roll.
How do you replicate the success that you had with your undrafted free agent class last year, and just kind of what goes into that process of finding those guys?
Yeah, well, our undrafted free agent process is huge, and it starts with our area scouts. They're the ones that identify those guys, which can be hard to do with all the players and the heavy volume that they're dealing with throughout an entire fall. But then you transfer that over to a collaboration process with a lot more people within our building, and then you get conviction on those guys, and not only hope to replicate from last year, but hope to really improve it from last year. But look, guys like you look at Jerry Jacobs, that came in and it was easy to see, look, he's got some of the best man cover skills, that we had out there in our DB group. I'll say one of the better, but that's how he makes it. And his relentless and being a dog and being tough. You got an AJ Parker that, his instincts stand out immediately. But we've always said, Dan and I've always said, you can call us the land of opportunity, but we don't care where you come from. We don't care where you got drafted, what the depth chart looks like, where, this guy's a vet and all that. We don't care about any of that. If you step in this building, you got an opportunity to compete, because if you've earned to step into this building, then you're going to have a chance to compete, and don't matter where you come from. So, you can talk about meritocracy, and it's just, whoever's the best, the best. Well, that's kind of how we approach it when it comes to undrafted free agents.
I had a non-draft question, if you don't mind. I'm
Go ahead.
curious if we can have an injury update on guys like Romeo, Jerry, who you just mentioned, Jeff, just kind of maybe where they're at in their.
Yeah, I think they're all progressing. And not going to get into, out of respect for the player, and our process, and not going to get into the specifics of any medical information, but all of our guys are progressing.
Jacobs and Parker, just like a year out from finding those guys, does that change how you look at the cornerback class in the draft, knowing that you were able to find like competent starters in the undrafted market?
Yeah, well, it just gives you confidence that we were able to identify some of those guys, and being that those guys have a year under their belt, they carry that invaluable experience that they have in that play time into this year. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, it kind of affects a little bit of how you look at it. Like, you can't forget about those guys, and it gets you excited about what those guys are going to be this year coming up.
Does college production matter when you see a guy who puts up numbers in college versus a guy who maybe you feel at this level has potential to do that, but maybe the production wasn't there in school?
That is a good question. You can't ignore the production, especially when we talk about a lot with like defensive backs. Like ball production sometimes it's hard to come by. So guys touching football a lot. You really can't ignore that. But you can't ignore production. But you also got to look at those critical factors of the actual player. Is he doing everything with his power? Does he have the skill set? Does he have the traits to do certain things? Does he have the football character. It's a lot of different factors that can come in that can project to more production when they get into the NFL. How are they used? Their scheme in college versus, what our scheme is going to be. So there's a lot of different, factors that go into that, but you definitely can't ignore the actual production because that's real factual.
Seeing the way that some of the guys that you've been talking about developed last year under your coaching staff give you confidence to hand some of the players you're just talking about to your coaches and say, let's do it with this guy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have the utmost confidence in our coaching staff. And just like I said, we're very fortunate and we're very blessed to be in a position to have a coaching staff that has a passion to develop. And the proof's in the pudding. It's proven they've actually done it. So gives you a lot of optimism.
Fran, at this point in your ownership, what level of involvement has Sheila Hemp had in this process, and has she weighed in meetings about the number 2 pick or her thoughts and ideas about the process throughout this last few months?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that Sheila's always informed with all the most up-to-date information. That's my job. She really doesn't, force that upon me. I think that's the expectation, that's the standard. But that's the great thing about Sheila. Sheila just has full trust in myself and Dan to do our job and make the right decisions and make sure that our franchise is represented the right way. And she has trust in that, and that's what she does. And she just wants to provide us all the support and resources to make sure that we have the ability to do our job. But yeah, it's my job to make sure that she is informed.
With where you guys are at in the process and your intentions of building, what is your reaction, your team's reaction, your staff, when a guy like Deebo Samuel becomes available? Is that a move that you guys think about making?
Yeah, well, we discuss every player that could become available. Anytime a player becomes available, anytime players, is being discussed, on the trade market, we do have discussions, but, we leave them in-house and just keep it at that.
Two other ones for you. We talked about trading down. How about trading up for number 2? How willing are you to trade up for number 1? Is that on your radar at all?
It's like I always said, if we had that conviction on that player, and it's like, look, it just makes sense, that we feel like we need to go get that player, we'll go get that player. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you don't feel like you need. And it's not necessarily, shun down on that actual player, but sometimes it's just like, hey, look, we feel pretty good where we're at. We feel good about this cluster of players that I talked to you about earlier, and we got them graded pretty evenly, so we'll be in good shape. It was very similar to the Panay situation last year.
The second one was Todd McShay said something yesterday that struck me as being interesting. He said the way NFL teams have paid receivers this offseason sort of tells you that that's the second most valuable position now behind quarterback. I know I asked about receivers in Florida last month, but I don't know, do you agree with that? Like, do you see that? Has something shifted that receiver is now above or equal to pass rusher, offensive tackle, sort of typical, second position behind quarterback?
Yeah, well, especially when you break it down into financial terms, especially when you look at the current scope of where those receiver contracts are going, it's something that you got to think about. Is that, do you want to, pay that money? And now it's a lot of different variables that go into that, with just paying a UFA or a free agent or trading for a guy, and you got to sign him to a big deal versus just trying to get one in the draft. And that's the unpredictability of part of it, is that you just don't know if you'll be able to get the guy that you want in the draft. So you got to weigh both, but I think there is some merit to that.
Draft trade chart. The Jimmy Johnson model exists out there still, but obviously, with the rookie salary cap, it seems like that's shifted a little bit. Do you guys use an internal draft trade chart? And I guess how much does that stack up to maybe some of the newer models that exist out there that you've studied?
Yeah, we do have our own internal chart, and but we do look at the Jimmy Johnsons and all the ones of the past that have held a lot of value. But we do have our own internal trade chart that we utilize heavily. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.